ancient Egypt still keeps secrets in broad daylight. Some of its biggest clues are also its biggest mysteries. The stranger part is that scientists can measure them and still argue about them. So yes, this ancient world is still messing with modern brains. You walk past these stories in museums like they are solved. A lot of them are absolutely not solved. One queen vanishes. One king dies before anyone agrees how. A giant statue loses its nose and nobody can name the culprit. A language survives on stone but not in sound. Even the mummies can turn out to be empty. And the pyramids somehow save the weirdest surprises for last. By the end, Egypt may feel less like history and more like a giant locked room. Ancient Egyptian writing gives you a skeleton of words, not the full voice behind them. Hieroglyphic, hieratic, and demotic scripts mostly recorded consonants, so the vowels that made words breathe are usually missing. That means famous names like Nefertiti and Tutankhamun are modern best guesses, not perfect recordings of what ancient mouths actually said. Scholars rebuild sounds by comparing later Coptic, bilingual texts and patterns inside the language itself. That gets us surprisingly far, but not all the way to a confident ancient accent. So one of the world's most famous civilizations is still partly, and somehow the next mystery is even weirder, because Egypt also mass-produced mummies like religious souvenirs. Ancient Egyptians mummified pets, sacred animals, food offerings, and creatures meant as gifts to the gods. The scale was enormous, with researchers estimating that tens of millions of animal mummies were produced over many centuries. Scans of hundreds of examples showed that only about a third held complete animals inside their carefully wrapped bundles. Another third held partial remains, while another third contained no bones at all beneath the linen wrappings. Some empty bundles were stuffed with mud, sticks, feathers, or eggshells that had still touched the sacred animal. So these were not simple fakes as much as ritual packages built around contact, symbolism, and overwhelming demand. And that demand only makes stranger sense when you meet the pharaoh who tried to redesign Egypt's entire religion. Akhenaten did not just tweak Egyptian religion, he flipped the table and tried to rewrite the rules. He raised the Aten, represented as a sun disk, above the old gods and attacked the name of Amun. He changed his own name, moved the capital to Akhenaten, and pushed a radically different art style. The mystery is that scholars still debate what he actually believed at the deepest level of his revolution. Was this strict monotheism, a softer henotheism, a political power move, or some unstable mix of all three? Even his death and possible mummy are debated, which is very on brand for a king who disrupted everything. And if Akhenaten feels slippery, the disappearance of Nefertiti becomes even more ghost-like once the trail suddenly goes cold. Nefertiti is one of the most recognizable faces on Earth, yet her ending is incredibly blurry. There is no clear record of her death, and there is no confirmed burial for her. Her body has never been identified with confidence despite generations of searching, testing, arguing, and incredibly hopeful speculation. Some theories placed her behind hidden walls near Tutankhamun, but those scans did not settle the dream. Others suggest she may be one of the unidentified royal mummies from the Valley of the Kings. So one of history's most famous queens is visually unforgettable and biologically missing at the same time. And the next royal mystery is even harsher, because it starts with a teenager who probably never expected to become world famous. Tutankhamun died around age 19, and modern technology still has not fully closed the case around his death. Scans and DNA testing suggest he had serious health problems, including malaria and physical issues in his foot and bones. A broken leg has often been treated as a likely final disaster that may have led to infection. One theory says the wound became infected after an accident and pushed him past recovery. But experts still debate how much weight to give malaria, bone disease, injury, and damage caused after death. So the best answer is not one neat cause, but a stack of overlapping problems with missing evidence. And then there's the Sphinx, where even one missing body part comes with its own detective story. The Great Sphinx lost its nose long ago, and the old Napoleon story does not hold up. A drawing made before Napoleon reached Egypt already shows the Sphinx without its nose, which kills that legend instantly. Archaeological studies suggest the nose was deliberately pried off with tools rather than blasted away by cannon fire. The problem is that knowing it was intentional is not the same as knowing exactly who did it. A later historian blamed a 14th century iconoclast, but the full chain of proof remains shaky. So the most famous missing nose on Earth is still attached to a missing culprit. And even with the face damaged, scientists still argue about what that face originally meant. Most Egyptologists connect the Great Sphinx to Khafre because it sits so closely within his monumental complex. That is the mainstream view, and the physical association between monument, temple, and pyramid complex is undeniably strong. But there are no Old Kingdom texts that clearly explain the Sphinx or its temple in detail. That leaves room for real uncertainty about how people at the time described its role. Its lion body, kingly head, solar symbolism, and temple layout all suggest a rich meaning we do not fully hear firsthand. Even the proportions of the face may reflect the sculptors adapting to flaws in the stone itself. And once stone enters the story, Egypt's next mystery turns into a giant cracked what if. At Aswan, an enormous obelisk was abandoned while still attached to the bedrock after it cracked during carving. It would have been about 137 feet long and roughly 1,200 tons. That frozen mistake is amazing because it preserves tool marks, measurements, and quarrying methods like a workshop paused in time. It shows workers carving granite with chisels and wooden wedges that swelled when soaked with water. Researchers feel fairly good about how obelisks were quarried and even floated on the Nile. But exactly how monuments that huge were raised upright still sparks argument, and modern replication attempts have struggled badly. And if lifting a single stone is hard to explain, lifting an entire pyramid is where things get ridiculous. One elegant clue about pyramid building came from something almost laughably simple: damp sand spread in front of sledges. Experiments showed that a sled loaded with stone moves much more easily when the sand in front of it is properly wetted. That matches tomb art showing workers pouring liquid in front of a hauling team dragging a massive load. Wet sand reduces friction, so the sled stops bulldozing a dry pile that fights every step forward. That helps explain how heavy blocks could move across prepared surfaces with human muscle alone. But it solves only part of the problem, not the full choreography of ramps, lifting, timing, and enormous organization. And inside the Great Pyramid, the next puzzle is not how things moved, but why certain passages exist at all. High inside Khufu's pyramid are narrow shafts leading upward from the upper chambers like stubborn clues nobody can ignore. For years, people called them air shafts, even though some were sealed and do not behave like normal ventilation. Others argued that they pointed toward important stars to guide the king into the afterlife. Still others proposed more symbolic explanations tied to cosmic waterways, resurrection imagery, and the king's rebirth after death. The honest answer is that scholars have proposed multiple purposes, and no single theory has fully won. So these tiny corridors remain some of the most famous maybe passages in archaeology, small but maddeningly unresolved. And the deeper you go into Khufu's pyramid, the more the whole monument starts feeling almost too precise. The Great Pyramid is aligned to the cardinal points with accuracy better than about 4 minutes of arc. That is an absurd level of precision for a monument built more than 4,000 years ago. Researchers have proposed several methods, including observing stars or tracking the sun on an equinox. One modern test showed that a simple equinox shadow method can produce the same slight counterclockwise twist seen at Giza. That is promising, but it is still a proposal, not a proven ancient instruction manual. The Egyptians left very few direct clues about which exact method they trusted, and that silence drives the debate. And that is still not the pyramid's final trick, because modern scans found something nobody expected. In 2017, researchers using cosmic ray muons detected a huge unknown space inside Khufu's pyramid above spaces already known. They named it the Scan Pyramids, Big Void, which sounds calm for something that startled the entire archaeology world. The structure appears to be on a scale similar to the Grand Gallery, which makes the discovery feel enormous. Scientists could detect it without tearing the pyramid apart, which is honestly a perfect modern Egypt moment. What they still cannot tell you with confidence is why that space exists or what role it served. It might be structural, symbolic, practical, or something nobody has guessed correctly yet after years of careful study. And that is the part that gets me. After lasers, scans, and physics, the pyramid still keeps a room-sized shrug. That is why ancient Egypt feels less like a closed chapter and more like a conversation still missing pages. Every answer seems to uncover a better question, which is probably why these mysteries keep pulling you back. If one of these facts completely rewired your brain, tell me which one would haunt you first. And if you want more true stories that sound made up, there is a whole Zorp facts rabbit hole waiting. Share this with the friend who thinks history is just dates and dusty statues in glass cases. Because Egypt is still out here confusing modern science, and honestly, that might be its coolest trick.